your TMS, by way of telematics, determines, oh, it looks like the driver is near the facility. So push them a little card that says, hey, here's an image of the facility, a little map, right? Hey, here's the south gate. That's where you want to enter, okay?
Oh, that's
and
pretty
please,
cool.
And here's a button. Tap this button when you're in and you're good. Tap this button if you're having a hard time getting in. And to be clear, it's however our customer wants to write that story to us.
It doesn't matter.
Respectfully,
to you, right?
I don't care that much. Do you want this button to say like mushrooms and that one to say pepperoni or pepperoni mushrooms? Dude, like you tell me. It's your business, not mine. But what we can do is, what my point is, giving drivers these very low friction experiences that are app quality without having to install an app, create a login, create a password, be trained, any of it.
Welcome to the ThinkFreight Podcast. I'm your host, Thomas Werdine, and it's my pleasure to have my friend Eric Rodriguez. He's the founder of VendorFlow, business texting for logistics teams. Eric, welcome to the ThinkFreight Podcast.
Thank you, Tommy. Pleasure to be here.
Absolutely, man. Absolutely. How's everything going? You guys where are you guys based out of?
We're all over the country. We got someone in Texas. We got a software developer out in Japan. Awesome. But most of us are SoCal. Wow. So we got Long Beach and a couple Los Angeles as well. I'm in downtown LA, incidentally.
Awesome. SoCal representing. That's awesome, man. Right. Yeah. I'm really appreciative you came on the show today, Erica. We had this scheduled for last week. Unfortunately, I had a few issues going on. But your story is really interesting, and it's kind of what I want to share here on the podcast. It's just interesting stories in the space, and whether that's building logistics teams or building a business texting for logistics teams. I think that there's a lot of interesting stories to be shared, and I'd love for you to kind of dive in and kind of share a little bit about yourself and your background and how you kind of found yourself in the crazy dumpster fire that is freight.
I love it. It's funny. It's extremely random how my whole career has developed. Doors close and doors open, and if the cookie crumbled slightly differently, we wouldn't be talking right now, which is super funny how that tends to go. As a fun fact, I started my career in the restaurant industry in high-end fine dining way back. This is like 2010. But it was a lot of fun serving people and in a really intense area. Got yelled at a lot. It was a lot of fun. Anyway, story for another podcast.
In logistics, you're still serving people, and it's still really intense.
That's right. Well, the big thing I learned at that restaurant, well, actually twofold, if I may. One was super strong culture. It was about 50 to 60 employees at the restaurant, but it was a super strong culture, and everyone bought into that premise. And it was very clear when someone gets hired, if they're not on board with that culture, they were out in like 2-3 weeks, and that was for the best. And that was really remarkable. This was the number one restaurant in San Francisco for several years. Wow. So it was really an interesting place to be. The other thing was service in terms of how to treat people. I think this can parlay into any business as well, where for most of my life, I assumed, well, when someone complains, a customer complains about, the thing is overcooked or whatever, often it's just, oh, we'll just give them a dessert and they'll kind of go away and it'll be fine. But no, I mean, we learned that, customers, they want to be treated like people. They want to be treated authentically. They want to be heard for their concern and for you to really understand it. They don't necessarily need a free dessert or a free anything to be comped. And I think some of these themes parlay well into a whole lot of business. But anyway, I digress. Back to your question of
I actually fully agree. Yeah. I'm going to touch on that. I actually fully agree with you. I actually get more irritated when a restaurant kind of blows me off and just is like, sorry, and just throws me a free dessert or comps or whatever. I'd rather be heard and air my grievances and why it was a mistake, why I think, or what process. I happened to me recently, and it was a very frustrating situation. So I definitely can attest to that. Definitely being the kind of the case there.
Yeah, can't we all?
I'll get back to your background as well. Sorry.
No, don't we all? But it's like I started myself on this whole tangent that I enjoy very much, I guess, because there's one more, if I may shove it in, which is just Please. That treating people authentically. So a lot of people would book their anniversary at this restaurant, and they're not necessarily super fancy schmancy people, but this would be the special occasion of the year. And often they'd come in, and understandably they don't know how to pronounce like souffle or whatever on the menu. And a big thing that we were taught in our service, which I think is why we were so successful as a restaurant, is to not be pretentious with these people, not talk down to people, relate to them, level with them, and be authentic with them, treat them like people. And my whole thing is, if someone would be really insecure about, mispronouncing, again, souffle or whatever,
Yeah.
I would often say something like, yeah, man, like I just learned that pretty recently myself. So like you and I are on the same page, like, don't worry. Anyway, I digress. That's getting a little out there. So let me fast forward in the story. So I stumbled into tech, mostly by way of just being in the Bay Area. I found a job on Craigslist, and I got to be in tech for the last 10 years or so, venture-backed tech mostly. The good, the bad, and the ugly. I understand a lot of the industry has certain skepticism toward a lot of venture-backed stuff. I agree. Totally fair. But with that said, that has been my career, product management and sales mostly. Now, the most recent and relevant experience, though, that really dovetails here is worked at a company called Next Trucking down in Los Angeles. And that's where the VendorFlow team really hails from. 4 out of 5 of us come out of Next Trucking. We're software people. We help to build TMS, mobile trucker app, shipper portal, all that good stuff. And that's where we learned a whole lot about logistics, made some observations that parlays into what we're doing now with VendorFlow.
That's really cool. And something I want to touch on that you said. So you said you found your first opportunity in tech from Craigslist. So that's really kind of like, not to age both of us, but like,
sure.
I used Craigslist a lot back in the day. Like that's definitely like early 2010s to 2012, 2013. Right. Like how did it feel? Like how did it go about that you found something on Craigslist like that? Like was it just kind of a standard? Like a lot of people listening to this, may have found jobs on Craigslist, but we have a lot of newer and younger audience that like may have just been like, Craigslist, like it's like the murder place. Like we don't use that anymore. How did you kind of go about finding that, and what kind of tech did you first get into?
Right. Super random. I mean, that was more spray and pray, just shooting resumes out and hoping for the best. Anything that seems half decent, just taking a stab at it. That's one strategy. That's not the best strategy per se, but it's a strategy just to get it out there. I would say in modern times, it's harder and harder to just kind of spray and pray your resume out there.
Absolutely. Today,
I would advise younger people to definitely go by way of networking. And I don't know about necessarily in-person networking events, maybe, but develop relations with people, have conversation with people, have them get an idea for who you are. Later in my life, all my career opportunities and the people I've hired into VendorFlow have been people I know, people who know me, so it's not this random resume that you're looking at. I think that's where you don't want to be, is a random resume. You want to be a person that people understand who you are, what you're about.
I completely agree. No, I completely agree. That's really good advice, especially because, with how the number one, how the job market is kind of shaping up right now, it's tough to find, the people you're looking for, but also for candidates to look to like have those opportunities. So I think that, if, whether it's logistics or you're job hunting in logistics, it's always about those relationships. It's always, I think anything in life is relationship driven, and kind of how you can kind of really succeed is just like building those really good relationships with people that you like want to either be like or be, in similar industries. Like if you want to be in tech, surround yourself with people that are in tech, and like you said, show yourself and be who you are, and those opportunities are going to come because they know that you're a hard worker or whatever it may be. So I think that's really really fascinating. And you kind of said you guys, a lot of the team has come from Next Trucking. So let me ask you this before we dive into that rabbit hole.
Yeah.
When you left Next Trucking, like what made you want to start your own company? Like, have you always been entrepreneurial? Like, have you always wanted to do your own thing, or did you just kind of see a need and just kind of decide to go for it?
Yeah, I've always had it as an option to keep open. But I didn't want to force it. I don't want to just be like, I want to start a company because I want to start a company. It's 100%. More like when I see that opportunity, I want to be able to go. And one thing that I helped line up for myself is, over my career as a product manager, I wanted to make sure that I was building credibility with the software developers that I was working with, so that whenever the day may come, whether it is a year later or 8 years later, I could tap people and say, hey, you remember me. I'm a decent person to work with. Maybe you might want to join me on this next venture. Because bringing on engineering, that's one of the hardest things
That's
you could
tough.
possibly do. So that was rather intentional, I guess, on my part to be ready for it. But yeah, I mean, of course, I wanted to start a business to have that level of freedom. I deeply enjoy it. The team deeply enjoys it. To have that level of control over what you're building, very little need for bureaucracy and BS and the office politics.
Definitely.
When it's just five of us, who are we politicking at? It's just the five of us. So we have a lot of fun like that. So that's been a big facet of it as well. And yeah, we slowly made observations at Next Trucking about a few directions we might want to go in. I'm glad we went in the direction we did. So yeah, we'll get into that in a moment, I suppose.
No, that's awesome. I'm glad that, you always kind of knew, but like you didn't try to force it, like you said.
Yep.
I think a lot of people get into or like try to force an entrepreneurial like lifestyle, and they don't really know. I know when I was younger, like I was always trying to find like the next quick thing to become an entrepreneur. I think a lot of younger people fall into that because we do want that freedom. And as I got older, I kind of took your approach as to like, I'm just going to set myself up for when the opportunity presents itself and I have a really good idea
Yeah.
and everything is like the stars align. That's when I'm going to make the jump. And obviously, the stars aren't always going to align the way you think, but the opportunities that kind of come at you, I think are kind of the stars aligning. When one door closes, it's time to look and really see, do I have a plan that works? Or is it, something that's just kind of half flushed and really not going to make a big impact? So I think that that's definitely the right approach is, knowing you want to do something for yourself, but aligning yourself and aligning your mindset and your goals for the long term to say, I'm going to do something, but I'm going to do it once the opportunity and the idea is right. I think
Yeah.
that's really, really smart. And, how, so let's dive into VendorFlow some more. So
Yeah.
you guys are in the tech space with VendorFlow. What is it? Let's dive right in. What is VendorFlow? I know I
Well,
introduced it a little bit at the beginning as like texting for business teams, but let's
yeah, that's
kind of
right.
dive into more as to like what that is and kind of how that is relevant.
Yeah, it is business texting software for logistics. And I realize just that label alone might not tell people enough to really get a
Right.
handle on it. So the question that we ask and answer, I suppose, is what if generic texting software such as Google Voice, RingCentral, Dialpad, and by our data, about 30% of freight brokers use RingCentral, about 10% use Dialpad, about 10% use Google Voice. So there's 50% of the market right there.
Yeah.
Are using generic texting software. Well, what do I mean by generic? Well, it's not really built for logistics. So the question is, what if that generic software was actually built for logistics? What would that even look like?
Right.
What problems would it solve? And that's really what we're after here. And there are two major differentiators or opportunities that we're really driving at. So even putting aside the VendorFlow product exactly, wouldn't it be better if your texting software integrated with your TMS? That's a major bullet point. And we'll always think, well, what do you mean integrate? Integrate in what way? Well, example, when you're texting with people, you're getting documents, images, proof of delivery, GPS, all that good stuff. You should be able to flow that into your TMS. And further, you should be able to run automations from your TMS to say, if this happens, then fire this text requesting this data. So classic example would be the driver's not tracking, so automatically fire a tracking request over text, or the proof of delivery hasn't been captured yet, but the shipment's been delivered. So fire a proof of delivery request. Those are the classics, right? So that would be one big step up for the industry if their texting software worked with their TMS. That's one. And the other, if I may, is as an operations rep using texting software. Again, obviously, I'm going to say you should use the VendorFlow texting software, but imagine anything you've seen in your career, Dialpad, Google Voice, RingCentral, all these. As an operations rep, you should be able to easily fire these common logistics workflows. Again, location request, e-signature request, document request, load offer, rate pushing, so on and so forth. These should be really handy to you as templates. Again, not just to save a few words for typing, but templates to fire, to capture data that you can flow back into the TMS. So those are the big opportunities we see, and that's really why we're developing this software for the industry.
Yeah, so I love it because the industry is so it requires so much hands-on manual entry. I remember when I was a broker and when I was helping scale, it was we were using RingCentral, and I would literally have to copy paste a phone number, from my TMS into Ring Central, from Ring Central, type my message, have one screen open or have them split screen so I can see the load details, what's going on, because I'm doing this with 20 or 30 loads and trying to get updates and all these other things. So I would spend a good chunk, 20 or probably an hour, just getting all of these messages in the morning ready to go and sent out, trying to get tracking updates, trying to see where people are, did things get delivered. And it was literally just a lot of copy paste, and then having to go, once I got answers, it was, okay, if it was a spot market carrier, who is this carrier? Who's this random phone number? And secondly, if it was one of my regulars, I had to make sure they were in my contacts. So that way I could see exactly who it was. So it was a lot. It was a very tedious process.
Right.
So it definitely, I feel like VendorFlow is capable of helping, ops teams and carrier reps like myself, like what I used to be, and really, build structure to the company and not have to spend 2 hours on tasks that can be automated. And then it can just, does your system say this, if there's some issue that arises that automation can't handle, I'm assuming it maybe flags something, or does it do anything to kind of show you like, hey, like this person has texted it and there's an issue like that can't be resolved with automation?
Of course, and automation should be a supporting mechanism more so Definitely. Than the only way. Yeah, the only way is not gonna last long. Right. But yeah, I mean, we have, for example, a concept of alerts. So let's break it down for a moment here. So imagine you are a kind of a dispatch manager or an operations director over a site, a terminal in some city where you have 10, 15 employees, carrier sales, dispatch, so on and so forth.
Yeah.
Good. So that you have one phone number where all the texting is happening under there. And maybe as a manager, you want to set up alerts. This is what you're alluding to say, okay, if we receive an inbound text from who knows who, a customer, a trucker, who knows, then if more than 2 minutes passes, or if more than 5 minutes passes, however they want to set it up, it's their call, not mine, then raise a flag. To say, someone's got to jump on this. It's been too long. So we do have those kind of basic concepts. But to be clear, we are distinct from the TMS. So we're not trying to be another source of truth that competes with the TMS. We partner with the TMS. So really, where our role is in this communications zone.
No, that's very interesting. So how many? I don't know if you know this right off the top. How many TMSs are you guys currently like integrated with, and who are some of those, if you don't mind sharing? Yeah,
well, we've spent a lot of our time around drayage, actually. So we've been we have a few that we've been pretty far along with a couple of our early customers on drayage, and what they want from us is to pull in images and documents and push them into the right shipment in their TMS. And GPS is another example where they want to capture that by way of text and then push it back into the TMS. So funny enough, we've been spending a lot of time in drayage. That's mostly because that's where our roots are. Nice Trucking was mostly a drayage-oriented company. That's where our network is, with people. And for whatever reason, drayage has just been dramatically easier to sell into than more traditional freight brokers. And to be clear, who is our target audience? Our target audience are twofold right now. It's freight brokers and fleets. And Absolutely. For whatever reason, drayage fleets, it's really resonated super well. So that's where we've been spending a lot of our time lately.
Do you think it has to do with the fact that there are so many, or there are so much more, or so many, what do I want to say? There's so much more in terms of like paperwork and things like that for drayage, because you are going into the ports, and a lot of times you are getting, some shipments do require this, but a lot of times you're getting empty or weighed scale tickets as well. So do you think it maybe just be a result of that? Because I know, there's a lot of times when on the broker end where, some of the shipments and PODs we were getting were, maybe I was getting one document, one piece of paper. Do you think that was maybe that's kind of some of the reason as to why drayage fleets kind of are swarming to what you guys are doing?
Well, yeah, they do have a whole bunch of images and documents. So yeah, in-gate, out-gate tickets are another classic example in their world. One of the hooks that really pulled people over in drayage was e-signature. We've had stories where before VendorFlow, the customer was so the customer would be like the fleet or the brokerage was emailing out documents for signature. but not even using the e-signature solution. So they were just firing out PDFs. And then the trucker would like go to Staples or Office Depot, print it out, sign it with ink, and well, if they even get to it. So there, you can imagine the nightmare of you blast out 100 documents, and sure, like 30 people will immediately sign it, and that's good. But what about the other 70? So we also made a way. So what was our answer to all this? Well, this organization now, they can blast documents in a broadcast. So select a group of phone numbers, a group of truck drivers that you want to contact, blast it out to them. In this case, it's for new rate agreements. So every quarter or so, they revise their rate agreements, they blast them out, and the driver can just pop it open, zoom in if they need, because we got to recognize this on a mobile phone, sign with their finger, bang, submit. And it's a proper e-signature that's, defensible e-signature. That was a big hook for them. But the stories are all over the place about one thing that's a challenge for me from a sales perspective is communications is a little bit of a squishy, abstract concept. And it's like, well, what is the value? Well, it kind of depends on what you're trying to accomplish. Is it about capturing documents more promptly, which is more about better service quality? Is it about booking more loads? Like there's a lot of directions. But when I talk with customers, they need to understand what the pain point is. Two more, if I may get into it, is they're pretty fun. One that we recently got a lot of is language translation. So Spanish, and most people wouldn't guess the second one we heard is Korean, where there are Spanish or Korean drivers. And of course, there's other languages too.
Yeah, absolutely.
But where the dispatcher, maybe their organization will have one dispatcher who speaks Korean, so it's fine, but that person's not working 24/7 situation. So sometimes the manager wants to step in, or the night shift wants to step in, and they're just like, dude, I don't know what's going on here. It's all in Korean or Spanish. So yeah, we recently added translation. That's like a very specific problem. Maybe 15% of our customers care about that, and the other 85%, it's like not that big of a deal. It just varies like crazy. Yeah. Anyway, I'll pause there so I don't bowl you over with use cases. But
no, you're good. So from what I've heard so far, it really helps with. So VendorFlow is really helping with like track and trace documents, being able to collaborate as a team when talking to your, whether it's carriers or whoever it may be, your driver teams, and it's also helping like reduce like check calls essentially too, because you can just kind of automate those at like certain times, or as it's getting closer, I'm sure, to like, hey, if we're at noon and we haven't heard from the driver, send a text message because the appointment is at 12:30 or whatever. Like, so it kind of, and it makes it a lot easier for logistics teams, for shippers even. Doesn't matter what logistics kind of teams you are, it's going to really help save time when checking on your shipments, or even if you're like a logistics manager who's tendering loads out to other brokers and you have a lot of shipments, you could essentially use this to automate a lot of your tracking within your brokers as well, and just being able to say, hey, is my shipment here? Blah, 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 blah. Can you send me documents? It's really a product. What I see, Eric, is a product for kind of everyone. Like it can be used on kind of every end of logistics. There's really not like we can always focus on freight brokers. No, it's like it's shippers, it's brokers, it's DCs, it's terminals, it's pretty much anyone working in freight. So I think that's really cool, and how you guys have kind of like created that space where it's like you're integrating with TMSs, you're helping solve some really, really interesting issues. Now, something I think you and I talked on a couple of times in our previous conversations was the need to like integrate with other platforms, other texting apps, and not just like the big, ones that enterprise companies use. So that's things like WhatsApp, Telegram. Are you guys able to integrate with those as well for logistics teams, or are you guys only focused on like the big fish?
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. That is another of our value props here, which you could call omni-channel. The narrative behind this is reach people where they are. Even back at Next Trucking, we had truck drivers who didn't want to install the mobile trucker app. And instead, the Chinese American community is going to use WeChat. The Latin American community is going to use WhatsApp. The Korean American community is going to use, nobody knows this, Cacao Talk is very niche.
You told me that last time.
Yeah,
I
there's a
wanted
bunch.
to remember it, but I
There's a
couldn't.
bunch. And then Telegram, of course, is really big. But if we're being serious about like what would be the ranking of the main channels, I mean, obviously SMS is sort of the great equalizer for everybody,
Yeah.
of course. But then under that, you have, I would say WhatsApp and Telegram are kind of a close tie. But what's funny is it varies wildly based on who I'm talking to because their carrier base varies wildly. That's
Definitely.
what difference. And hilariously, so example, I don't think they want to be named yet, but we're working with they're headquartered in Chicago, but they have a Memphis terminal and I think it was like Duluth, Georgia terminal. And they were hilarious because one of their terminals is having a Korean language situation. That's what they care about. But Duluth, Georgia doesn't care about Korean language at all. What they care about is Telegram. For Duluth, it was, if you don't support Telegram, we're not going to adopt whatever you have in mind. We're just going to keep using Telegram because that's what we've been using. And let me go deeper in Telegram for a moment.
Please,
on a couple
that's
ways.
really interesting.
Telegram, for those who don't know, and forgive us for not introducing Telegram properly, it's a very popular social messaging app, very popular among sort of like the crypto groups and a lot of people. But regardless, Telegram is very advanced and supports a lot of advanced capabilities. Example, with Telegram, you could push a button to a driver where when the driver taps it, it can track over time, track for 8 hours, for example. That we're really excited about. Most channels only allow a single button, single GPS, that's it, type of transaction. Exactly. So we think that's kind of fun, not to mention chatbot opportunities and beyond. But yeah, we've talked to, there's 2 top 50 brokers that, again, they can't be naming names here, but that have said that Telegram is their primary channel for communicating with carriers. So it's big and it's out there. And I encourage folks who haven't heard about it, and maybe you're more senior, to ask on the ground. I mean, are your carriers sales reps using Telegram? A lot of opportunities. So yeah, and of course, yeah, we support these other channels, and we kind of store the preferred channel of the driver. So, maybe a different ops rep comes in and they don't really know the preferred channel. It'll just be like, oh yeah, this has been a Telegram mostly conversation, so you should probably stay with Telegram.
That's cool. So that was my next question, because we had mentioned that a lot of the bigger names, like Ring Central and things like that, were all team accessible. And I was curious if things like the WhatsApp and Telegram were also going to be team accessible, or if it was going to be more of that personal dynamic. That's really cool. Now, do they have to set up, like, if you're a logistics team currently using a Telegram and you all have individual accounts, how does that work? Do you guys then have a centralized Telegram account? Say if I was, 123 Logistics, I've got a 123 Logistics Telegram, or are we linking into all of, okay, so it's just a 123?
It's that. So yeah, for 123 Logistics, what we do is we onboard 123 Logistics first with their regular SMS phone number. It's the simplest thing to do. Yep. And to be clear, let's say it's their dispatch hotline. That's what they want to do. So they keep the voice aspect of it, whatever, like IVR, round robin, keep it, great, leave it alone. But VendorFlow can add texting underneath it. So it's the same phone number for the driver experience, right? So technically this up here is Vonage and this down here is VendorFlow, right? But it's still the same number. That's important. And then we say, hey, customer, now that we're up and running with SMS, what else do you need? And usually it'll go in directions like, if you added WhatsApp, that would be cool. We walk them through it because I wouldn't expect most freight brokerages to be strong at like learning how to claim a WhatsApp for Business account, and it's a bunch of stuff. But we help walk our customers through it. Think of us as the river guide for the big. If you think logistics is a mess, communications is a little bit of a mess of its own. Yeah.
No, that's really cool because I'll be honest, like I didn't even know that you could do a WhatsApp Business account. So like, if I was setting something up like this for a logistics team, like I would have no clue. But I do know, and I do, as a past carrier rep, know the importance of these different communication channels like WhatsApp, like Telegram. I didn't get into using the other like WeChat and what's the Korean one?
Cacao Talk. Yeah.
Cacao Talk. So I didn't get into using those, but like WhatsApp and Telegram, I was always on. Like I still follow a lot of like. Talk to a lot of groups and things like that in the logistics and trucking community, just to kind of keep up and keep the pulse on those things, because I think it's always important to keep those opportunities, like you said, keep those relationships with those people open, because you never know, like, when a door opens, when a door closes, or how I can potentially help them in the future as well. So I think it's just really an interesting idea, an interesting product you guys have really developed for everyone, and it makes it a lot easier for logistics teams. Now, is there anything that you guys do, um, that I didn't really touch on? Is there any other features that are really important, or you see, or it's really important, or any sneak peeks of anything coming
Yeah.
that you might want to share that is coming up in the future? That I may have missed.
Yeah, I mean, I could come with at least a couple. I mean, I could spend 3 hours on it, but I'll choose two to be merciful.
Yeah, absolutely.
One theme that we really enjoy is that, to a lot of folks, they might think, oh, well, texting is just like sending words back and forth. Like, yeah, so what? Like, what's really the opportunity
Right.
here? What's really interesting is, so WeChat, the Chinese one,
Yeah.
right? They are sort of the what do you want to say, on the vanguard of texting technology, and that they're doing really impressive stuff. You could, see your doctor on WeChat and, I don't know, order a pizza all in the same
wow.
day.
That's
You could do a
pretty cool.
lot of stuff. That's the super app, right? A super
Okay.
app. Now, what am I getting at? These other channels. Yes, WhatsApp, Telegram, but also something called Android RCS. Android has been pushing their V2 of SMS called RCS. What's my point? With these channels, one more. Apple Business Chat is another.
Yeah,
So that's the Apple
definitely.
side of it. Now, in these channels, now you can push what we call rich experiences over text. But it's not really text like words. It's a message with a prompt where they could tap buttons. So example, your TMS by way of telematics determines, it looks like the driver is near the facility. So push them a little card that says, hey, here's an image of the facility, a little map, right? Hey, here's the south gate. That's where you want to enter, okay?
Oh, that's pretty
please,
cool.
And here's a button. Tap this button when you're in and you're good. Tap this button if you're having a hard time getting in. And to be clear, it's however our customer wants to write that story to us.
It doesn't matter
respectfully,
to you, right?
I don't care that much. Do you want this button to say like mushrooms and that one to say pepperoni, or pepperoni mushrooms, dude? Like, you tell me. It's your business, not mine. But what we can do is, what my point is, giving drivers these very low friction experiences that are app quality without having to install an app, create a login, create a password, be trained, any of it. It's just, I need this from you. Here it is. Please do it. One thing I learned in management is take away people's excuses. Don't give them excuses to not do it.
Yeah.
They can't say, oh, well, I was having it didn't install, or, oh, I forgot my password. Nope, it's right there. Please just press it and we're done. And again, when they press it, we update the TMS accordingly. So that's what we're really excited about, where this is going.
I really love that. And I'll tell you why. So I used to, my last brokerage, and even when I was at TQL, I focused a lot on plastic. And my last brokerage, we moved a lot of milk crates. So we were doing power only drop and hook trailers. And a lot of times these dairies are huge facilities, and they generally have their trailer pools in really weird areas. And it was always a major headache and these are daily. So it was, half the day was spent trying to tell drivers where the actual gate was or where they have to pick up. And so this is something that could have been so useful to just literally say, hey, he's near the facility. This automates and sends, and it shows him exactly on the map. Here's the south gate. Go in the south gate. And you can probably mark off, there's a security guard at the south gate. Check in with him. He'll show you where that's all time that I never could get back to go sell, to go talk to customers, to go build more relationship with my carriers. So it was just time fiddling around, basically telling different drivers, we used a lot of the same carriers, but sometimes these groups had 10 or 15 drivers. And if I have to tell 15 different drivers between, 15 different shipments, how this has to operate, it's not only frustrating, but it's counterproductive in my experience. It's been counterproductive because it creates a little bit of a tension point between carrier sales ops and then these new drivers who, number one, I think just like the dispatch overall should be telling them these details when like we always would give them the details, but
Right.
every time it would just get lost, and that's okay. Like those details are going to get lost,
Sure.
but it's just having those tools like VendorFlow in place to be able to send those very quickly and help the driver. Like it's not just about the carrier side, right? Or I'm sorry, the broker side. It's also about the carrier experience. If they have a better and easier time, like you said, a frictionless experience with doing this, with getting these updates and seeing, oh, okay, I'm right here. I can see on my GPS, I'm here. Let me just go to this entrance and boom, it makes it very easy. So I think that's really something cool about VendorFlow, and I'm glad you brought that up. And I know you said you had one more, so let's touch on that too as we're kind of closing up on time here.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. And just to add one note on what you're getting at,
Please,
one way to think about this would be, SOP, standard operating procedure. This idea of kind of encoding your SOP. So your TMS can have the SOP. So here's the rules. Maybe this shipper requires a specific little step. Every time you're at drop off, the driver has to take an extra picture to prove that there's no damage or whatever the shipper demands. Rather than your operations team having to remember every time, you can have the TMS be like, oh, well, it's this shipper and the driver just arrived. Therefore, fire this template to remind the driver to do the thing that's easy to forget. I'm not just making this up. Like we've heard this from a number of our customers. This is a theme that we're excited about. But there was one area that one more topic I was going to touch on.
Please.
Now, of course, just to confuse everyone right at the very end. So I understand folks will be like, okay, so it sounds like VendorFlow is a competitor of RingCentral, Dialpad, Google Voice. And in a million ways, yes. But there's one caveat I'd like to offer there, which is we're interested in exploring integration with RingCentral, plug-in with RingCentral. So imagine, you're a freight broker or a carrier and you're watching this and you're like, that sounds really interesting, VendorFlow, but man, we're still on like a 10 more month worth of contract commitment to RingCentral. So, and we're a big company. I don't see us making a huge switch anytime soon. There are ways to get a little taste of VendorFlow in RingCentral without completely moving off.
I love that.
So there's a couple ways we can do that, whether it's more of a single sign-on model, so you can keep all the RingCentral situation you got, but just use the VendorFlow interface instead. That's a way you could kind of baby steps your way into VendorFlow land without disrupting too much. Another way is to have a RingCentral plugin, meaning a little widget where I'm an operations rep, I'm on RingCentral like usual, but now there's a little VendorFlow widget where I could push e-signature requests, location requests, document requests, which you can't do in RingCentral. And again, flow that back into TMS. So I guess my point is to anyone watching who's like, this is really interesting, but I don't know if I'm going to drop my dial pad tomorrow. There are ways we can still work together, and let's get to know each other regardless. But maybe that's more of a closing statement. So there's a couple notes for you.
Absolutely, man. I really love that, Eric. I really appreciate you, coming on the show today, sharing a little bit about your story, about VendorFlow. How can people find you online? Where's the best place to check you guys out? And how can people find VendorFlow?
Yeah, I mean, of course, our website being vendorflow.co, that's one. And our LinkedIn page is really where the action goes down. We got to spend some more time on Twitter. Not quite there yet, but really LinkedIn is where it's going down. So find us there. And VENDOR, Flow, FLOW. I think I nailed it, pretty sure. But that's how you spell VendorFlow. And check us out there. And awesome. We'd love to go deeper.
Awesome. We will have all the links to Eric and VendorFlow in the show notes. And one last thing I want to touch on, you guys are going to be at TIA soon for the Shark Tank. Is that correct?
That's right. We're going to be on the Shark Tank stage. It's going to be a lot of fun. I think one of your recent guests will be on there as well. Yeah,
Josh Wiles, he will also be there. Looking forward to kind of hearing about how that goes. If you guys are going to be at the TIA conference, definitely check out Josh and Eric. They're both going to be there. It's going to be a really cool Shark Tank experience for them. I really, really wish you guys both the best, Eric. If everyone out there, if you guys like today's podcast, make sure you go check out Eric. Let him know that, you guys saw the podcast and how great it was, how great of experience it was. And make sure you guys do rate the podcast 5 stars and give it a thumbs up if you're over on YouTube. Don't forget to check out the newsletter, ThinkFreight.io. Those drop on Monday and Wednesdays. And we'll catch you guys in the next episode. Thanks, Eric.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.